So good morning, and I'm really happy to talk to you to a topic that is fascinating to me, Catholic women in science. So many people might not realize how many brilliant women of faith are pioneers, are women that blazed a trail for others, and their stories deserve to be heard. We often hear about the contribution and achievement of male scientists, but women have historically been underrepresented in science. There is even a term for that, the so-called Matilda effect. And this lady up, you don't see her yet, this lady is Jess Wade. She's a chemist, and she has put more than 2,000 biographies of female scientists to Wikipedia because she realized, okay, there is a gap there. So today we are celebrating science and faith, and as Father Jonathan said a few years ago at this meeting, remember, you are not a scientist or a Catholic, you are a Catholic scientist. So these women that I will present to you weren't just scientists who happened to be Catholic, but their faith informed their work, and their work deepened their faith. So let's delve into the story of these remarkable women. First, I want to say that my focus is very much on pioneers, and this has to do also with what St. Edith Stein says. It's not literal, but it's like many quotes on the internet, they got a little bit summarized and then stick. But this one sticks a lot to me, and I think to many other women here as well. The world does not need what women have or what women do. The world needs who women are. So, how did I get involved in this topic? On Twitter back in 2019, I got a response to a post on Maria Agnesi, an Italian scientist. She sounds really cool. Ever notice how Catholics always seem to be omitted from popular lists of female scientists and intellectuals? So this remark really kept me going because I realized, okay, there is really a deep gap of knowledge here, and I tried since then to decrease this gap of knowledge a little bit. By 2023, I have found and described, some only short and others with more detail, 50 Christian women pioneering in science, but in, you see, all faith traditions like Catholic, Protestant, and Orthodox. Now, preparing my talk, I looked specifically for Catholic women scientists, and my list has currently 36 women. So I will not talk about all the 36, don't worry about that. So what are the criteria I'm looking for? First, they have had an impact on the science and or the science education at their time. It's also important to note that science education for women started later, and it also people had to overcome quite a bit of adversity here. And so simply as you will see in one of the pioneers, simply going from Scotland to France to study medicine at that time was already out of the, like extraordinary. Second, their lives were informed, transformed, and inspired by their Catholic faith. So I'm looking for some confirmation that they were practicing Catholic people. So we love lists because they bring order to chaos, and they have meaning and purpose, and they relieve stress and help focus the mind. But lists also have limitations. So, can there ever be the all-encompassing list, in this case on Catholic female scientists? I would say no, it's not possible. In addition, the fact-finding mission has an element of serendipity. And to explain this moment of serendipity, which is a wonderful English word and very difficult to pronounce, let us look at the so-called ENIAC 6. Okay, so here you see the first general purpose digital computer in 1945. So this laptop and this one, this could do much less than this laptop here, and it filled a room. The ladies, the so-called ENIAC women, were known as the refrigerator ladies, meaning, okay, photo models in front of a cool machine. Fortunately enough, in the 80s, a Harvard programmer lady rebuilt the story and interviewed some of them and directly and highlighted the incredible work they were able to carry on, because they developed the first sort routine, the first software application, and were the first teachers of modern programming. Okay, what about focusing on just one lady, because I know that she is Catholic? What about the others? Is this fair or not? So I was looking whether there is more information out there on their religious background, and in fact, there is. So Betty Jean Jennings, the first one, said Kay was a Catholic, Betty a Quaker, Ruth and Marilyn were Jewish, and I was an ex-Church of Christ Christian. We had a wonderful time with each other, mainly because none of us had ever been in close contact with anyone from the other religions or faith traditions. We had some great arguments about religious truth and beliefs. Despite our differences, or maybe because of them, we really liked one another. So we have mentioned 5. So what is about the 6th lady? This is Frances Billa Spence. So not much is known from her. She joined the team later, left it earlier, was moving with her husband to another area, and left research. So, okay, one indication was that she was a friend of Kay McNulty from their college, and it was a Chestnut College, an all-girls Catholic college at that time. And so, okay, I thought, this is good, and I found information. One of good informations are obituaries. So I found one for her and could verify that she was in fact a practicing Catholic lady. Okay, time and geography. So I said that the list is not all-encompassing. So if we take a look at history and geography, very few women scientists existed prior to 1850, and I'm looking at the date of birth here. The majority was born between 1850 and 1950. Looking at these two groups, it's interesting to see that the majority was coming from Europe, 15, followed by North America, 9. And so far, I was only able to find one women scientist each in each Africa, Australia, and Asia. Of course, we need to factor in that that Catholicism is not distributed the same across the globe, and also that in these Africa, Australia, and Asia, also the education, the scientific education of females started later, but still, I would think there should be more out, but need to look for them. Okay. I would also like to point out that the path to higher education for women was different in continental Europe and in the US. So England was more following the US, so the English-speaking countries, but continental Europe was different to the US. In the US, at first, all girls' colleges were opened, starting in the 19th century, and only well into the 20th century, universities became co-educational. In Europe, women were allowed to attend universities, which were all male institutions, like one country at a time, and trying to make this happen. So the first country was Switzerland in 1870. So they were late in introducing female voting, because this was only in, I believe, 1967 or something like that. But women could start already in 1870 to study at universities. Other countries were following. One of the last was Prussia in 1908. But this meant that they were allowed to study. This did not mean that university appointments were open for them. This came later and is a different story. The women I wanted to present to you I may put them into 3 different groups. The first, pioneers in science. The second, sanctity and the crossroads of science and faith. And the third, significant scientific contributions. Let's start with the first. I already mentioned Agnes McLaren. She was Scottish, and she was the first woman to graduate in medicine in Montpellier, France. She was also a founding member of the women's suffragist movement in Scotland, and she converted to the Catholic Church in 1898 at the age of 61. She was a physician and practiced at that, mainly in the south of France. And she met Franciscan nuns, and they really influenced her deeply and also were responsible for her ultimately converting. And when she heard of the really difficult or the tremendous health needs of women in India and Pakistan, because due to the custom of seclusion, women could not be seen by men other than immediate family, so this meant that they could not receive medical care from male physicians. They were kept alone. She then founded the St. Catherine's Hospital in Rawalpindi, which was India at that time, is Pakistan now. In the early 20th century, 2 women were following her example. The first was the Austrian physician Anna Dengel, who founded a congregation for Catholic sisters who were physicians and missionaries, and the Australian physician Mary Glory. We will meet her later. Her outstanding characteristic is charity put in action. Okay. The second lady is Princess Therese of Bavaria. This Bavarian princess was not just a royalty, she was a force of nature. She was an entomologist, zoologist, botanist, travel writer, and champion for women's education. She did not receive a formal education. She was mainly self-trained, and she was not afraid of adventures. She led 2 scientific expeditions to South America, a true testament to her adventurous spirit. She pushed herself and her team hard, but it all paid off. Therese returned to Bavaria with a treasure trove of specimens, plants, and animals, and then she spent years meticulously classifying them, documenting them, and writing books on her findings. Therese was not only a careful scientist, she was also a deeply faithful woman, which we know from her diary. We would maybe think, okay, she had nothing to do but doing science. That was not the case, because her life wasn't entirely her own. So she really needed to create the space for investigation. Why was that? Her mother passed very early, and Therese made a promise to her mother to care for her father, and this is a promise she kept faithfully. Her father was not in direct line to the throne, but he needed to he became a regent, which is kind of a stand-in king for his brother Ludwig II. You may know him because he is the one that built the famous Neuschwanstein castle in Bavaria. So her father was now in this position to stand in for the king, and this meant that Therese had a lot of representational duties. And this forced her to carefully carve out time for her research. And I think many women scientists today can relate to that struggle to find this precious time to pursue their own scientific endeavors. The third one, let's meet Eva von Bahr-Bergius, who was a true pioneer in physics in Sweden. She became Sweden's first female physics lecturer. We call this docent. It goes through an habilitation process, which is like more developed PhD and lecturing experience, and this went back to 1908. Her thirst for knowledge took her to Berlin where she conducted research from 1912 to 1914. This is also where she formed a lifelong friendship with another scientific powerhouse, Lise Meitner, the Austrian physicist who explained the nature of nuclear fission. So, sadly, upon returning to Sweden, Eva couldn't secure a university position because women simply were not allowed at that time. It was only in 1924 that female scientists could have a position in academia. Her contribution from the Berlin time was recognized by science greats like Niels Bohr, who mentioned her in his Nobel Prize lecture in 1922, and she was the only Swedish scientist mentioned in his talk. Eva's journey then took an interesting turn. She could not get an academic position in Sweden. She could not return to Berlin, although she was invited to join a research group there, but then the First World War broke out, so impossible to move there. And so she then became a teacher in what we would call a community college. Eva's journey took an interesting turn in 1930 because she embraced Catholicism. She converted in 1933, and I was reminded of Susie's talk yesterday, who said there were years of finding out, searching. I mean, Eva took 12 years, okay, to convert. But when she converted, she also wrote a book on apologetics to explain Catholicism to a Protestant, Lutheran, Scandinavian audience. And her scientific mindset is something that she had gained in her brief experience as scientist, and that influence that marked her all her time. Also when she, in her conversion story to Catholicism. In 1938, she helped Lise Meitner, who needed to flee from Berlin since although she was Protestant, she was of Jewish ancestry, and she helped Lise Meitner to rebuild her life in Sweden, and was in contact. She had maintained her scientific network all the time, and has made it easy also for her to connect to professors in Sweden and to Niels Bohr and others who were very keen to get Lise Meitner out. Okay. The fourth lady is Piedad de la Sierva, and I would call her an invisible pioneer, because she is not well known at all, and the only information you will find is in Spanish. So I wrote a blog post, but of course that's not enough. I hope at some point in time to be able to write a Wikipedia article on her. Because I think it's simply sad that no one knows her. And in reality, she worked in 3 distinct areas: radioactive particles and atoms, So she had her laboratory ready in Madrid. She was at first, I think, in Denmark. And then the Spanish Civil War broke out, and her lab was gone. She also applied for a position in academia. She was unsuccessful, and this was in 1941, and the first female university professor came in 1954, so she was really ahead of her time. She then joined an independent industrial research group, and she worked on optic glasses as instruments for the Spanish Navy that were then also very important because they could export it to the countries involved in World War II. Her institution decided that they are not interested in optics anymore, so she took part of her equipment and said, okay, what can I do with that? And she was turning her interest into isolating brick material that is heat resistant. Changing her field 3 times is a strong sign of resilience. The 5th lady is Wangari Maathai. She got her education mainly in the US. She was an alumna of the Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas. And in 1971, she became the first woman in East and Central Africa to earn a degree, to earn a doctoral degree, and she then became the chair of the Department of Veterinary Anatomy and an associate professor in both cases, she was the first woman to attain these positions in the region. She developed the idea of planting trees to conserve the environment and also to improve the quality of life and to empower women. So when she returned from her studies in academia in the US and then also later in Germany, she realized that trees were decreasing at a rapid rate, simply because they were cut down due to civilization. So she felt, okay, this is not a good direction. And at the same time, she asked ladies and thus empowered those ladies and gave them a job to not only plant trees, but of course also to care for them. It's not enough to just plant and then let go. No, you need to care for them. It's the same as this university here does with these young trees that are currently protected against cicada. I hope that's now the right pronunciation. So together they planted more than 20 million trees. And she said, when we plant trees, we plant the seeds of peace and hope. And in 2004, she received the Peace Nobel Prize for her contribution to sustainable development, democracy, and peace. Okay. Now, I wanted to point out the importance of Catholic education. She received Catholic education from her primary school up to university. Now I come to the second group. Sanctity in the crossroads of science and faith. So these 3 ladies are not necessarily scientists, but they have an advanced academic degree. And they have been recognized as saintly persons by the church. So the church has this process in place to declare people as saints. But of course, we also know that many other saints were out there. They serve as a powerful example of the diversity of paths within the church and can be strong intercessors for women in science. The first is Saint Gianna Molla. She was an Italian pediatrician, wife and mother of 4. You may have heard of Gianna Molla. Sometimes her story is simplified as the story of a pro-life martyrdom. However, her story is a little bit more nuanced. And in a recent article in the Church Life Journal, Abigail Jorgensen explained this very well, and I'm following her here. Her pregnancies were challenging, and she experienced 2 miscarriages. And 2 months into her last pregnancy, she developed acute pain and was diagnosed with a fibroma, which is a benign tumor. The doctors offered 3 options: an abortion, a hysterectomy, means taking the uterus out, or the removal of the tumor alone. Gianna chose the 3rd option to save her baby. The surgery was successful, and the child was carried to term. So Gianna was willing to sacrifice her life for her child, which was a sentiment she expressed clearly. She delivered a healthy girl via cesarean section, but unfortunately developed sepsis afterwards and died a week later. It is important to remember that even today, bacterial infections in the context of cesarean section can rapidly become life-threatening, especially in regions with limited medical care. So her story reminds us that sainthood is not reached in one single moment, like the moment of her death. No, it is in these small little steps along the way that she lived her life in the presence of God, her life as pediatrician and mother. As Pope Francis says, there are saints next door, saints that we might not recognize immediately. And Gianna Molla is a beautiful example of that. Another example is Blessed Guadalupe Ortiz de Landázuri. She was born in Madrid in 1916 and entered the Universidad Central in 1933 to study chemistry, one of only 5 women in her class. And during her studies, the Spanish Civil War broke out. And in this time, her father was arrested and executed. Guadalupe was a stronghold in her family, and she could also forgive those who were responsible for the death of her father. After the war, she became a teacher, and in 1944, while attending Mass, she felt a profound calling from God that would then lead her to join the Opus Dei prelature. In 1950, at the invitation of Saint Joseph Maria, she moved to Mexico to start Opus Dei's apostolic activities there, and she inspired many to serve the church and society, emphasizing the care for the poor and elderly. So, for example, she established with a physician friend of her a mobile clinic for patients in need. She enrolled in a PhD program in Mexico, but she just didn't have time for that. So when she returned to Spain, she completed her PhD in chemistry, and Piedad de la Sierva, a lady we have already mentioned, was her PhD advisor. So Guadalupe's life was a testament to her deep faith, especially love for the Eucharist and devotion to Our Lady, and is a testament of her joy and her unwavering friendship. She was beatified in 2019. The third lady is Mary Glory, a servant of God. The title servant of God is the first step on the path to sainthood and recognizes a life of heroic virtue. Mary was one of the first women to study medicine in Melbourne, and she became an ophthalmologist. Inspired by another doctor that we already met, Agnes McLaren, Mary discerned her vocation to be a physician in India. So she became a nun, and remarkably, she was the world's first nun-doctor missionary. She was a true visionary. She championed sustainable health care for the poor, established medical education institutions, and played a key role in founding St. John's Medical College, which continues to train healthcare professionals today. Mary remained in India and dedicated her life to serving God in others until her passing in 1957. So, the third part is important scientific contributions. And here I want to refer to the website of our society. And we have here a well-curated list, a list put together by Steve Barr and Andrew Kassebaum. And I want to mention Andrew Kassebaum specifically because he has a large database of Catholic scientists, and yeah, we give each other ideas, and it's a very nice communication line. Okay. The criteria for this list are first being Catholic, so that's very similar to the list I have, and the second is scientific importance, which means to include only scientists who made important contributions or breakthroughs. And we should acknowledge that the focus of the Society's website here is more on the apologetic side. So giving the example of Catholic scientists, or that Catholic scientists had made important contributions, while I'm looking more at the side of biography and the life of scientists. We have on the Society's website 103 brief biographies, out of which 4 are female. I'm late, isn't it?
I think you're 5 at the moment. 5 females.
The fifth one has not died yet. I'm talking of past scientists. So it's Edith Flanagan is number 5. Okay, the other one you have here, and I realize I need to get to the point. So I want to suggest now that we include some people, and first a couple of chemists, Antoine and Marie-Anne Lavoisier. You see them here with their chemical equipment. Let's look first at Antoine Lavoisier. He is the father of modern chemistry. The discoverer of oxygen may be very important, the principle of conservation of mass, because he and his wife did very careful quantitative measures, and he also helped to establish the metric system. He also made important contributions to biology, pointing out that animal respiration is slow combustion, and also more on the practical side on the use of soil fertilizers. He was one of the fermier général of the tax collectors, and tax collectors in general are not very popular people. We know this from the Apostle Matthew. During the French Revolution, or in the aftermath, he was, together with his colleagues, sentenced to death and executed in 1792. He returned to his faith in God during his time in prison, which was several months long. And then Marie-Anne continued his work, but they worked closely together. So the question is, what was her contribution? Was she just a lab assistant? No. She was a translator, also contributing paragraphs to explain the text she was translating from English. She was a salonière, which meant a meeting point for scientists. She was a scientific editor and an illustrator. What did she say about herself? She said she is a secretary. And here we need to, we should think on that this meant she was running the show in a similar way as a secretary general of a scientific institution is running the show. Okay, here we see a drawing that she made herself, and she and the people knowing her saw her as a scientist in her own right, and we should do the same. Marie-Anne Lavoisier came to science through her husband, and the next lady, Marcella Boveri, found her husband through science. So again, I'm proposing a couple, Theodore and Marcella Boveri. Theodore made very important discoveries on genes located on chromosomes, and then they worked together on the interaction of cytoplasm and chromosomes and early embryonic development. And an important book that Theodore Boveri wrote was concerning the origins of malignant tumors in German, 1914, and then translated by Marcella in 1929. She worked with skill and passion, but without formal recognition. But we know from letters that they wrote and from their laboratory notebooks that they worked together as a team. The last lady I want to propose is Gabriela Moriale. Gabriela Moriale is an Italian-born Spanish chemist, and she made groundbreaking contributions to thyroid pathophysiology. Her work, often in collaboration with her husband, Francisco Escobar del Rey, shed new light on the thyroid and its hormones. So she established that T4 needs to be deiodinated so being a prohormone, to build T3, which is then the active hormone. She also found that thyroid hormones cross the placenta during pregnancy and are essential for fetal brain development. And she introduced in Spain the screening program, like the prick test, in newborns in 1978. Her advocacy was also instrumental in introducing iodized salt with iod in Spain. I want to also point out that she was the driving force in this team. So they worked together, and it is, I would say, also noteworthy that her husband let shine her, okay? And she was really the inventing person here. And I come to my last slide. Final remarks. Pre-final. What can we learn from these women whose lives were as diverse as life can be? Courage, a pioneering spirit, and patience in everyday life and adversity, a scientific mindset and a sense of awe and wonder, love for others in different aspects, and to live the Catholic identity. I would hope that you take from this talk to spread the word, okay? We need role models, and I would say that these scientists, women scientists, they even become like mentors and friends to me, and this can well be. Due to the communion of saints, we know that we can also have friends in heaven. Paraphrasing Kierkegaard, we can learn from the lives of others to learn for our own future. Thank you.